December 3rd, 1976. Kingston, Jamaica. Darkness envelops the mansion on Hope Road as 7 armed men enter through the gate. Bob Marley is rehearsing in the living room, preparing for the free Smile Jamaica concert that could unite a nation torn apart by political civil war. What will happen in the next 90 seconds will forever change the history of Caribbean music and politics. Gunshots tear through the air. Bullets pierce walls, windows, and bodies. Marley falls to the ground as lead pierces his chest and arm. His wife, Rita, is shot in the head. Manager Don Taylor is riddled with bullets 5 times. When the smoke clears, the question echoes off the blood-stained walls. Who is trying to assassinate Jamaica's most influential musician just before a peace concert? But this story doesn't begin with bullets. It begins 3 decades earlier, on a dusty hill where a light-skinned boy learns the brutal meaning of not belonging to any world. February 6, 1945. In the rural village of 9 Mile, St. Anne Parish, Robert Nesta Marley is born. His mother, Cedella Booker, is 18 years old. His father, Norval Sinclair Marley, is a white captain in the British Navy in his 50s who rarely visits his mixed-race son. Little Bob grows up trapped between 2 worlds that reject him. Too light for the black children who call him German with contempt. Too dark for the Jamaican colonial society that sees him as shameful evidence of racial sin. On the dusty streets of 9 Mile, the boy learns his first lesson in injustice. The world will judge you by the color of your skin before listening to your heart. His father disappeared from his life when Bob was 6. Norval Marley died in 1955 without leaving an inheritance, without recognition, without a farewell. Only abandonment. This wound would never fully heal, but it would transform into something unexpected, a visceral empathy for all the rejected, all the marginalized, all those without a voice. At 12 years old, Cedella makes a decision that will change everything. They move to Trenchtown, the poorest and most violent neighborhood in Kingston. Trenchtown isn't a neighborhood. It's an urban battleground where poverty crushes dreams and violence is the everyday language. Rusty zinc shacks, unpaved streets that turn into rivers of mud when it rains, barefoot children with bellies swollen with hunger. Here, in the rotten heart of decaying British colonialism, Bob Marley finds his true education. He also finds his salvation in music. In the backyard of a decaying house, teenager Bob meets Neville Bunny Livingston and Winston Hubert McIntosh, who will later call himself Peter Tosh. The 3 share something deeper than poverty, a desperate hunger to escape, to be more than just statistics of colonial misery. They practice with broken guitars, they sing on street corners, they absorb the ska that emerges from transistor radios, that frenetic rhythm born from American jazz and African drums. But Bob is looking for something more, something no one has done yet. In 1962, at the age of 17, Bob recorded his first single, Judge Not. It was a commercial failure, but something had begun. The seed had been planted. 1966. Bob Marley, disillusioned with his stalled music career, works as a factory worker in an automobile plant in Delaware, USA. He sends money back to Jamaica. He considers giving up. Perhaps music was just a naive dream of a poor boy. Then he receives a letter from his mother. There is a spiritual movement growing in Jamaica. It is called Rastafari. It speaks of the Ethiopian emperor Haile Selassie as the living incarnation of God. It preaches peaceful resistance against Babylon, the oppressive Western system. It promises redemption for the descendants of African slaves. Bob returns to Jamaica transformed. In Trenchtown, he fully embraces Rastafarianism, the long conversations about Marcus Garvey and the return to Africa, the rejection of the corrupt political system, ganja as a sacrament, dreadlocks as a symbol of natural power. But above all, he discovers this: music can be prophetic. The Wailers, now with Bob, Bunny, and Peter as their Rastafarian core, began experimenting with a new sound, slower than ska, heavier, with a hypnotic bass that beat like an ancestral heart. They called it reggae. In 1973, everything changed. Chris Blackwell, founder of Island Records, sees something in Bob Marley that no one else perceives. A revolutionary prophet wrapped in the body of a rock star. He offers him an unprecedented contract, total creative control, and a budget to record as an international artist, not as a third-world curiosity. The result is Catch a Fire, released in April 1973. It's not just an album, it's a manifesto. Concrete Jungle depicts urban oppression with harrowing poetry. Slave Driver directly confronts the legacy of slavery. Every song is a blow against Babylon. But it's the next album, Burnin', that contains the bombshell. A song called I Shot the Sheriff becomes something extraordinary. Eric Clapton, the white British guitarist, covers it. It reaches #1 in the United States in 1974. Suddenly, the world listens. Bob Marley, the bastard child of 9 Mile that nobody wanted, now has the platform to shout the truth to millions. And she screams. Get Up, Stand Up becomes an anthem of global resistance. No Woman, No Cry captures the painful beauty of surviving in Trenchtown. Them Belly Full But We Hungry warns of bloody revolutions if injustice continues. By 1976, Bob Marley was not just a musician, he was a spiritual leader. He was a political threat. He was a symbol of something the powerful feared. A black man from a poor country telling the world that the system was rotten and had to fall. Therefore, in December of that year, someone decides that he must die. December 5, 1976. Bob Marley, his arm bandaged and his body ravaged by residual adrenaline, does something incomprehensible. He steps onto the stage of the Smile Jamaica concert. 80,000 people scream when he appears. He sings for 90 minutes, every sharp movement a reminder of the bullets that nearly killed him 48 hours earlier. As war ends, he lifts his shirt and reveals the bloodied bandages. The message is clear: they will not silence me. Not with bullets, not with fear. But that night, while Kingston celebrates his bravery, Bob Marley makes a decision no one expects. He boards a plane. He leaves Jamaica. He takes refuge in the Bahamas, then in London. Is he running away, or is he planning something bigger? As the plane takes off into the Caribbean darkness, a question hangs in the humid air of Kingston. Who ordered the attack? Was it the CIA, fearful of his political influence? Was it the Jamaican political parties embroiled in civil war? Or was it something darker, something connected to the forces Bob Marley was challenging with every chord? The answer will come, but first, the prophet must go through his darkest moment. January 1977. London shivers under a brutal winter. Bob Marley walks through gray streets that smell of burnt coal and dead colonial dreams. He is alive, but exiled, famous, but hunted. His bullet wounds have healed superficially, but questions consume him. Why him? Why now? Who fears the music of a poor man so much that they need to kill him? He takes refuge in a basement in Chelsea, surrounded by the Wailers and perpetual clouds of marijuana. Here, in the heart of the empire that enslaved his ancestors, Bob Marley creates his masterpiece, Exodus. The album took shape between February and April of that year. Each song is a layer of the pain and revelation of exile. The title track is an epic call for a return to Africa, a monumental reggae number that lasts over 7.5 minutes, building tension like a prophecy unfolding in real time. Jamming offers a joyful respite but hides verses about spiritual unity. Waiting in Vain exposes raw, loving vulnerability. But it's One Love, People Get Ready that ignites. A simple message: human unity is possible. Love can conquer hate. It seems naive, it seems impossible, but Bob Marley sings it with such conviction that millions will want to believe it. May 1977, Paris. Bob Marley plays football barefoot in a park, his only moment of true peace. A friend throws a hard pass. Bob runs, plants his foot to turn. Something in his right big toe snaps. Sharp pain, a little blood. It seems trivial, a weekend athlete's injury. Apply ice, carry on. He has concerts to play, revolutions to inspire. But beneath the broken nail, something malignant has begun. Cancerous cells are silently multiplying. Acral lentiginous melanoma, a rare and aggressive form of skin cancer that disproportionately affects people with dark skin. The killer the bullets failed to be is now growing inside her own body. He doesn't know it yet. The pain is manageable. The revolution awaits. Exodus was released in June 1977. Time magazine would later call it the album of the 20th century. Marley embarked on a European tour. In every city, thousands packed stadiums to see the Rastafarian prophet who had survived an assassination attempt. His simple yet radical message resonated with disillusioned youth from Berlin to Amsterdam. The system is broken, but you don't have to be. April 1978. 16 months have passed since Bob left Jamaica. 16 months of explosive international success. 16 months of wondering if he'll ever be able to go home. Then comes an impossible invitation. Both of Jamaica's political parties, Michael Manley's People's National Party and Edward Seaga's Jamaica Labour Party, bloody enemies in a civil war that has killed hundreds, want Bob to return for a peace concert. The same event that almost killed him now calls him back. April 22, 1978. Kingston's National Stadium is packed with 32,000 people. Bob takes the stage wearing the sacred robe that Emperor Haile Selassie gave him during his visit to Ethiopia. He is a prophet, he is a king, he is a symbol. He sings for hours. When jamming comes on, he does something no one anticipates. He stops. He calls Michael Manley and Edward Seaga to the stage. The two men come up, confused, cautious. Bob takes their hands. He joins them above his head. 32,000 voices erupt in collective catharsis. The image is iconic. Two political enemies joined by the hands of a Rastafarian musician. Peace seems possible. Reconciliation seems inevitable. But the photograph is deceiving. Behind the forced smiles, both politicians are furious. Marley's gesture has made them look like puppets. The truce will last weeks, not years. The violence will return. Bob Marley has just learned a brutal lesson. Music can inspire, but it cannot replace political will. Even prophets have their limits. 1978 closes with Bob more famous than ever, but spiritually restless. He has conquered Europe. He has tried to save Jamaica, but he feels something fundamental is missing. He has never set foot in Africa, the promised land of Rastafarianism, the ancestral home that Marcus Garvey predicted as redemption. In 1979, he received an invitation that would change his understanding of himself. Zimbabwe, newly liberated from the racist regime of Rhodesia after a brutal war of independence, would celebrate its birth as a free nation. They wanted Bob Marley to play at the independence ceremony. A Jamaican musician in the African motherland, celebrating the defeat of white colonialism. It's the circle coming full circle. April 17, 1980, Rufaro Stadium, Harare, Zimbabwe. 100,000 people fill every corner. Bob Marley and the Wailers take the stage at exactly midnight, the moment Zimbabwe officially ceases to be Rhodesia and becomes a sovereign African nation. Bob sings Zimbabwe, the song he wrote specifically for this moment. Every man got a right to decide his own destiny. Tears stream down his face as he sings. Tears of joy, of fulfillment,
of something deeper than words can capture.
He stands on African soil, celebrating the freedom of black people who defeated white oppression. The rejected mixed-race boy from 9 Mile has finally found his place in history. But even in this triumph, the pain in his foot worsens. After the concert, he walks with a limp. Local doctors examine his big toenail, now perpetually infected. They urge him to see a specialist. He ignores the warnings. There are more concerts to play, more souls to reach. July 1980, New York. Bob Marley collapses during a concert at Madison Square Garden. The pain is unbearable. His foot is swollen and discolored. Doctors subject him to extensive examinations. The diagnosis comes like a delayed bullet. Acral lentiginous melanoma, stage 4. The cancer that began in her big toe 3 years ago has metastasized. It's in her lungs, her liver, her brain. The doctors give him months, maybe a year if luck is on his side. Bob Marley is 35 years old, at the peak of his global influence, in the middle of a world tour, with a message the world is finally listening to, and he is dying. He refuses the amputation of the finger that could save his life. His Rastafari faith forbids mutilating the body, the sacred temple. Some will say it's spiritual nobility. Others will say it's religious suicide. He decides to continue the tour. If he's going to die, he'll die doing the only thing he knows how to do, singing truth to power. But in September of that year, during a concert in Pittsburgh, he collapsed again on stage. This time, he didn't get up. The tour ends. The final battle begins. Autumn of 1980. Bob Marley arrives at the Ringberg Clinic in Bavaria, Germany. Dr. Joseph Issels promises the impossible, to cure terminal cancer with alternative treatments. Strict diet, experimental injections, procedures that conventional medicine considers desperate quackery. Bob clings to hope. His dreadlocks, a symbol of his Rastafarian identity for decades, must be cut for the treatment. It's like tearing out his soul. But if it means seeing his children grow up, it's worth it. For months, he struggles. He wastes away until he's just a skeleton. His skin stretches over prominent bones. His eyes, once filled with prophetic fire, sink into dark sockets. But he keeps praying. He keeps believing. He keeps fighting. Until he can't anymore. May 1981. The German doctors have nothing more to offer. Bob Marley weighs less than 90 pounds. Cancer has ravaged his body from the inside. It's time to return to Jamaica. But the direct flight is too long for his condition. They stop over in Miami. On the plane, surrounded by his family, Bob Marley utters his last coherent words to his son, Ziggy. Money can't buy life. This is the prophet's final lesson. All the fame, all the records sold, all the global influence, none of it can stop death when it calls. May 11, 1981, 10:30 a.m. Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, Miami, Florida. Bob Marley, born Robert Nesta Marley in the dusty hills of 9 Mile, Jamaica, breathes his last. He is 36 years old. May 21, 1981, Kingston, Jamaica. Bob Marley's state funeral is an unprecedented event for a musician. Prime Minister Edward Seaga delivers the eulogy. More than 100,000 people throng the streets. The coffin, decorated with Rastafarian colors, is transported from Kingston to 9 Mile, where it all began. He was buried with his Gibson Les Paul guitar, a soccer ball, and a bud of marijuana, the objects that defined his life: music, play, spirituality. But the story doesn't end at that village grave. In the decades after his death, Bob Marley became more than just a man. He became a universal symbol. His face appeared on murals from Sao Paulo to Johannesburg. Redemption Song was sung at protests against dictators on 5 continents. One Love became an unofficial anthem of human unity. The irony is brutal. The man who died poor, whose estate was modest at the time of his death, now generates more than $20 million annually. The Bob Marley brand is sold on t-shirts, posters, cannabis products, and headphones. He is the highest-earning deceased musician year after year. His sons continue the musical legacy. Ziggy, Stephen, Damien, Kaimani, all talented, but none capture the particular spark, that unique combination of spiritual hunger and political urgency that made Bob irreplaceable. In 1994, Bob Marley was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 1999, Time magazine named Exodus the album of the 20th century. In 2002, he was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Every honor comes too late. The prophet is not here to receive them. For decades, the 1976 assassination attempt has remained officially unsolved. Theories abound, the CIA fearing his socialist influence, Jamaican politicians protecting themselves, drug traffickers seeking territorial control. Years later, one of the attackers, a man connected to the Jamaica Labour Party, is murdered in prison before he can fully testify. Another dies under mysterious circumstances. The secrets are buried with them. But subsequent journalistic investigations revealed the likely outcome. The attack was ordered by factions of the Labour Party who viewed the Smile Jamaica concert as pro-Manly propaganda. Bob Marley, trying to rise above politics, became its victim. The bullet that grazed him in 1976 didn't kill him, but cancer cells, triggered by a trivial football accident, accomplished what the killers couldn't. Or was it really that trivial? There's a theory circulating in Rastafarian circles, never proven but persistent. The toe injury wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate injection with carcinogens, a CIA assassination disguised as a sports injury. A perfect method, years delay between the attack and death, impossible to trace, always deniable. Evidence? Almost none. Declassified documents? None. Witnesses? Dead. But this is verifiable. The CIA had active programs in the 1970s to eliminate influential Third World figures who promoted anti-American ideologies. Bob Marley, with his anti-Babylonian rhetoric, his sympathy for African liberation movements, and his friendship with Fidel Castro, fit the profile perfectly. It is also verifiable Bob Marley repeatedly refused medical treatment that could have saved him, not out of ignorance, but out of unwavering faith. His death, then, was as much a product of spiritual conviction as of physical illness. Martyr, victim, prophet who paid the ultimate price for speaking the truth. Perhaps it is all of those things. Or perhaps it is something simpler and more devastating. An extraordinary man defeated by the ordinary limitations of the human body. A prophet doesn't predict the future. A prophet sees the present with such clarity that he exposes the lies we've all accepted as truth. Bob Marley saw 3 truths that his era denied. First truth: music can be revolution. Before Bob, pop music was entertainment. After Bob, pop music could be a political manifesto, a spiritual call, a weapon of peaceful resistance. He transformed reggae from a Caribbean curiosity into a universal language of protest. Second truth: spirituality can be radical. The Rastafarianism that Bob embraced was not escapist religion, it was liberation theology. The rejection of Babylon was not merely metaphorical, it was a concrete rejection of colonialism, exploitative capitalism, and institutional racism. God did not live in churches built by the oppressor. God lived in the resistance of the oppressed. Third truth: love can be political. One Love is not a naive song about hippies holding hands. It is a revolutionary declaration. If humanity can recognize its fundamental unity, all systems of oppression based on artificial division collapse. Love, truly practiced, destroys borders, racial hierarchies, and economic exploitation. That's why they feared him. That's why they tried to kill him. not because of his catchy songs, but because of the truths those songs contained. Every prophet pays a price. Moses died without entering the Promised Land. Christ was crucified. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were assassinated. Bob Marley was no exception. He paid with his body, ravaged by cancer. He paid with his peace of mind, living with justified paranoia after the attack. He paid with the fragmentation of his family. 11 acknowledged children by 7 different women, complex relationships, divided loyalties. He paid with the posthumous commercialization of his image, transformed from revolutionary into a marketable brand. But he also received something few prophets achieve: validation during his lifetime. He saw his songs become global anthems. He saw Zimbabwe's independence. He saw millions sing his words. He knew before he died that his message had resonated. The question then is not whether his sacrifice was worth it. The question is, have we, who survived him, honored that sacrifice? 43 years after his death, the world that Bob Marley challenged remains fundamentally unchanged. Global poverty persists. Wars continue. Structural racism thrives under new names. Corporations exploit the global south. Political systems continue to serve elites, not the people. Babylon, in its own language, has not fallen. It has been refined. So, did the prophet fail? Or perhaps the question is wrong. Prophets don't promise immediate victory. They promise lasting truth. Bob Marley planted seeds that are still sprouting. When protesters in Hong Kong chant, "Get up, stand up," in defiance of the Chinese regime, the seed germinates. When climate activists march to the tune of Exodus, the seed germinates. When a poor child in Lagos discovers the Wailers and decides his voice matters, the seed germinates. The revolution that Bob Marley started didn't end in 1981. It was just beginning. There's something supernatural about how Bob Marley's music transcends context. Songs written about the specific Jamaican reality of the 70s resonate in Palestine in 2025, in Brazilian favelas, in Thai protests. Because Bob distilled particular experiences into universal truths. Buffalo Soldier speaks of a specific black regiment in the U.S. Army, but anyone who has felt used by a system that despises them hears their own story. Redemption Song was inspired by a speech by Marcus Garvey, but every person seeking personal liberation finds a reflection in its verses. Bob's genius wasn't solely musical, although musically he was innovative. His genius was empathetic. He could feel collective pain and express it in 3 chords and half a dozen words that anyone could sing. That is true immortality. But here's the uncomfortable tension. Bob Marley the myth has overshadowed Bob Marley the man. The man was complicated. He was a serial cheater. He had children he barely knew. He could be authoritarian with his musicians. He smoked marijuana so intensely that it worried even other Rastafarians. His politics were sometimes confusing, a friend of questionable African dictators, naive about leaders who betrayed revolutionary ideals. He wasn't a saint either. He wasn't the Black Christ as some devotees portray him. He was human, talented, visionary, charismatic, but human. Does this diminish his legacy? No. It complicates it. It makes it more real, more accessible. Because if Bob Marley, with all his imperfections, could change the world, then maybe we can too. You don't need to be perfect to be a prophet. You need to be genuine. 2025. Bob Marley has been dead longer than he lived, but his presence only grows. His musical catalog has sold over 75 million records, making him one of the best-selling artists in history. Legend, a compilation album from 1984, has remained on the Billboard charts for decades, a nearly unique phenomenon. In 2024, the biographical film Bob Marley, One Love was released in theaters worldwide, introducing a new generation to his story. It wasn't perfect. Some critics argued that it was overly idealized, but it brought his name, his music, and his message to millions who had never known him. His grandchildren and great-grandchildren are now musicians. The Marley bloodline continues to produce art. Skip Marley had a hit with Slow Down in 2019. The tradition endures. But more important than record sales or movies, his spirit lives on in every person who chooses to resist, who chooses to speak the truth even when it's difficult, who chooses to believe in human unity even when it seems impossible. That is the true exodus, not a geographical migration, a spiritual migration from fear to love, from division to unity, from silence to song. Bob Marley sang, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. 43 years later, those words remain revolutionary. They remain urgent. They remain true. And as long as they are true, the prophet never dies.